things I want to do on my channel is look into things that most people don't give a lot of thought to. Necessarily, this is going to lead to talk about controversial topics, politics, religion, anything like that. Today, we're going to address some political ideas. A lot of people don't think clearly about the words that they see or the words that they use. And part of what I want to do here through these videos is make you think a little bit more about some of the words that you see and hear around you in life. And I want to give you a clear, obvious background for those ideas so you understand what they were originally meant to mean despite how they might be used now. So the word and the idea that we're going to look at today is fascism. Fascism gets used all the time in all sorts of ways. Everybody thinks fascism, Nazis, same thing, and that's it. Or people think fascism is anything I don't like. It's the other political ideology. I believe this, you don't, you're fascist. I'm going to force your thoughts into that definition to prove that you're a fascist. But that's not what fascism is. That's not what fascism was. That's not any of that. Fascism is a word, it's a term for a type of movement. And I'm going to say that very clearly. It's a type of movement. It's not a movement specifically. Nazism was a specific political movement. There was a political party. They did specific things. They had specific goals. That was a political movement. Fascism is not a political movement. It's a type of political movement. And much in the same way that a cherry pie is a type of pie, but apple pie is also a type of pie, you can have multiple political movements that meet the requirements of fascism, but are very different because it's the type. Apples and cherries are not the same thing, but an apple pie and a cherry pie are both pies. The flavor of that movement is based on the political and cultural context in which the movement forms. Fascism specifically is still something people debate about. They debate whether you even can give it definite characteristics because, again, different fascist movements will have different ideas. The one thing that remains solid across all fascist movements is that they are, by nature, authoritarian. They defer to one person as the person. That is the authority. That person's authority cannot be questioned. And everything else sort of springs out from there. Now, you can start being fascist without a figure. You can find your figure as you move along if you're trying to create a fascist movement. So, I want to look at one of my favorite definitions or my favorite sort of explanations of fascism. Umberto Eco was an author. He grew up in fascist Italy. Italy with Benito Mussolini are considered the originators of fascism. Mussolini started the whole thing and other people sort of copied him and took bits from him. And so he created sort of what we would call the first fascist movement. He was also the first person to sort of call himself fascist. He was like, this is what we're doing. We're authoritarian. We're far right. We're gonna do these things. This is what it means. One of the things that Mussolini said was nothing but the state, nothing outside of the state, nothing against the state. So the idea is that the government and the person in charge is the only thing that actually matters. Everything else can be pushed aside because all that matters is this, right? This party, this leadership, this person. Again, that authoritarian nature. And you'll see that come up as I go through this list of things. So Umberto Eco didn't say fascism must complete this checklist. Umberto Eco was very clear that fascism wasn't one solid thing. It was a ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, maybe. But it's not a specific, concrete set of beliefs because, again, it is informed by its culture. Pies can have different types of crusts, they can have different types of fillings, they can have different types of toppings, so that one pie may look completely different from another. but they are both still pi. Fascism is the same way. This fascism may not look like that fascism, but they can both be fascism because they both develop from these core concepts. So Umberto Eco made a list of core concepts around which fascism forms. Any fascist movement will have at least one of these, and most likely more than one of these, wrapped up at its core, and then it will stick other things onto the outside until it's built up into its own political movement. So we're going to look at Umberto Eco's list of, he calls it Ur-Fascism, or, the structure onto which a fascist movement is created. The very first thing on the list is a cult of tradition. So a fascist movement will have a cult of tradition. They will constantly be telling you about how better things were in the olden days. We're going to hark back to a golden age of when our country was good, when our region was good, when our people were good, when our culture was good. But it's not good now. And why is it not good now? Well, the second thing on that list is a rejection of modernity. Now, I had a college professor who loved the word modernity. She used it multiple times, every single class period, so I got a good idea of what it was. Modernity is the things that make us modern, the progress that we have developed, be it technological process, the fact that I can make this video and send it out so that millions of people can see it, not that they will, but that millions of people could potentially see it. Or maybe it's cultural progress. We're more accepting of different groups. We've stopped segregating. We've stopped discriminating against certain marginalized groups, right? We are getting better as a people. We are more moral. We are more correct than we were in the past. We have progressed. We have moved forward. Fascism says, no, we haven't. Actually, we've gotten worse, and we need to go back to that time of tradition. If we re-embrace the traditions of the past, that's how we can move forward. We've been moving forward, but we're on the wrong path. We're going downhill. We need to get back on the right path and go uphill. And that's what will solve all of our problems. Now, you're going to hear a lot in this about fascism solving your problems. And that's because of some elements that we're going to discuss later. But for now, remember, it's always about some imagined mythical past when everything was better, and also all the things we've been doing to make society better have actually made it worse. You may sense a hint of a conspiracy theory coming in here, and that will develop much more as we go on. Number 3 is perhaps the hardest one for me to explain, because it's very conceptual, sort of. It's called the cult of action for action's sake. And the idea is that you always have to be doing something to further the cause. There are no days off. There is no relaxation. Everything you do has to be moving forward. So whether that is hanging flags, plastering, stickers everywhere, wearing buttons, bumper stickers, tags on your vehicle, whatever it is, you have to be moving the cause forward all the time. And it doesn't matter why you're doing it or how you're doing it. What matters is that you are doing it. There's an encouragement of action without thought. So you might think to yourself, okay, well, why am I moving this forward? How is what I'm doing going to take my movement forward? Fascism says, no, stop thinking like that. Just go do something. And if you go do something, you're going to move the cause forward. Moving the cause forward is good. Boom, done. Move on. There's a rejection of intellectualism with fascism. You can see that with the embracing tradition, rejecting modernity. There's a lot of this thought, right? Like, well, the way I think things would be better, right? Fascism doesn't ask you to teach that question. It asks you to answer it with right and then move on. There is no stopping or considering. There's no strategic maneuvering for the average person under fascism. That is left to the leader. The leader tells you what to do, you go do it. The leader tells you your chant, you go chant it. The leader tells you you gotta buy a sticker, you go buy the sticker. It is a movement that is based on telling people to do without telling people to think. And those who do the most without thinking are the best. You should be moving instinctually. You just know in your heart what the right thing to do is, and you do it. That's good. You're a hero. So the next two, once again, sort of bundled together here. There's a fear of difference. Fascism will take a specific identity, and they'll list all the things that you have to adhere to, and then anything that's different from that is bad. And you see this all the time, and oftentimes they'll put it in their name. If you're trying to start a white supremacist fascist movement, top of your list for what you want people to be is white, obviously. And then you may have some other lists, right? You need to believe this, you need to believe this, you need to believe that. Anybody who doesn't believe those things is wrong. We need to stop trying to embrace differences. Compromise, understanding, no. We need to be a homogeneous whole where we all think the same, we all feel the same, we all are the same. So anybody without those characteristics, I don't want to say, but they shouldn't be around. That's kind of a core thing that we see in a lot of fascist movements. Now, what they come up with for their list of requirements can be different. Again, fascism has different flavors. But at the core, there will be a group of people who are in and a group of people who are out. And there will always be tension between those groups. And the fascists will align themselves with their group, and there will be tension against the other group. And that leads us to the next one, which is disagreement is treason. Remember, fascism is very authoritarian. There is one person at the top, there is one party at the top, there is one group at the top, and to question them is unthinkable. Because if you question them, then you are against everything. You are one of those people who is trying to drag us further down the wrong road. You are one of those people who is trying to drag us down. You disagree with us trying to make things better, therefore you are bad and making things worse. A common trait you may see here is essentialism, right? People are essentially things, right? Like, you can't disagree with us for valid reasons. Because if you disagree with us, you are therefore inherently bad. Because we are inherently good, and we believe these things. There's a lot of this in fascism, because again, fascism is so focused on being and doing the right thing within this little ball of beliefs. And a lot of the things I've explained so far are common to a lot of political movements across the political spectrum. And there are obviously right-wing movements who call themselves left-wing. There are left-wing movements who call themselves right-wing. It can be very confusing to know where on the spectrum we are. A lot of the things I've said, again, common to a lot of political movements. But as we go deeper into this list, you're going to start to see some of the traits that really help define what the core beliefs of a fascist movement are. So here's the question. If society has been going down the wrong road for so long, and we need to stop, reset, and go a different path, well, how did we get here? How did things get to this point where everything is so terrible? And the fascists would simply say, well, they did it. You might ask yourself, who? Who is they? The fascists will always have a they. There is always some group causing this to happen. They may change who the they is, right? It might be the politicians. It might be the bankers. Fascism always has a they. There's always a group that's been pushing us towards this bad path where we've ended up. Very conspiratorial. If you haven't picked up on that yet, I'm just going to say it. Fascism is very conspiratorial. There's the idea of a them that we have to fight against. Well, how can we tell who they are? Well, they are the ones who are different from us. They disagree with us. They are treasonous. Fascism often fits together very well in practice because it's really easy for us to comprehend these ideas. Putting these ideas together in your brain is easy, right? Every every story we've grown up with has had this, right? There are bad people, there are good people. The good people have to beat the bad people. Fascism is all about this dichotomy, saying to people, we are the good people, you are the bad people. And this leads directly into the next point, which is an appeal to social frustration. If you are someone whose life is not working out the way you thought it would, if you are someone who doesn't like your social situation, maybe you don't get enough attention from the opposite gender, maybe you don't get enough attention at your job, maybe you feel like you're just a cog in the machine, well, we have something that can help you. The reason you feel that way is because they have ruined society. Fascism appeals to those who are most at risk. And I don't mean at risk as in marginalized communities. I mean at risk as in individuals. An individual who is unhappy with their lot in life is exactly where the fascist wants to recruit. That's going to be their best foot soldier. Because when you're in a tough situation, you want to look for a reason. Why is it like this? If I know why it's like this, maybe I can do something to change it. Fascism says, yes, there is a reason. It's them. And if you join us to fight them, you'll be one of us, and we'll make sure you're taken care of. Fascism appeals, fascist political movements appeal to people who feel like they're on the outside. Whether they are or not is not important. It's about how they feel. A lot of fascism, you may have noticed, is about how we feel. We don't like those people because they're different. That's a child's understanding of social structures. But the fascist movement doesn't need intelligent, mature, intellectual people. Fascist movements need willing foot soldiers who act without thinking. Fascists always, every fascist movement in history, has recruited from among people who are unhappy with how things are. Now, you might say to yourself, well, everybody's unhappy with how things are. The world is terrible. And you would generally be correct. But there are people who, for the next level, are ready to blame someone else for their problems. This is where fascism comes in. Fascism is the ultimate abdication of personal responsibility. You say, hey, the reason my situation is like this is because there's a shadowy cabal of people who are making the world a certain way. And if we take them down, then we can remake the world in our image and it will be better. We'll go back to tradition. We'll go back to the way things used to be when things were good. I feel like I'm repeating every single thing in each new step, but that's because all of it is so intertwined and connected. All of this kind of coalesces into our next one, which is an obsession with a plot, right? We said, there's the shadowy cabal of people. They have a plan. They have a plan for what to do with the world, and we have to make a plan to stop them. We have to step up and stop their plan because they're trying to take us further down this bad road, and we have to stop them so that we can go back to tradition, we can reject modernity, and we can do what we want. So, again, there's a group that's messing you up. That group is different than you. They have a plot. It's very, very simple-minded. This is very middle school. That clique of kids is plotting against us. We have to stop them. Nothing about fascism lends itself to higher order thinking. The people at the top of the fascist hierarchy are doing all of that, and then they are telling all of the followers what to do. And all of those followers go and they do it without thinking. This is why fascism doesn't always have, and doesn't usually have a ton of infighting, right? You're not going to see a lot of infighting because fascists don't care about nuance and differences. Fascists care about big differences. So they'll give you a checklist. As long as you check off all those boxes, you're good and we'll work with you. And those boxes may be as simple as be a member of our party, follow our leader, vote for us. Boom. That's all you got to do. Any other weird beliefs you have? Great. We'll talk about a nebulous conspiracy where they are messing with you. It's up to you to decide who you want that them to be, right? If you want the them to be this group, then it is. If you want it to be that group, then it is. We don't care specifically what the group is. In fact, maybe we'll tell you it's all those groups working together. This obsession with a plot and a conspiracy comes up over and over in fascist movements. And fascism's end goal, and I hope I'll make this case by the end of this video, fascism's end goal is basically always. The next two kind of talk about how fascists see their enemies. So, on the one hand, our enemy is weak. They're weak, they're cowardly, they're, physically weak. They're not like us macho people. We're cool. They're weak. We can beat them up easily. We can stop them if we just stand up. But at the same time, they've managed to fill all aspects of our society. They control everything. They have forced their way into positions of power, and now they are almost too powerful to stop. That's why we have to act now. They're too powerful to stop, these wimpy little... When I put it right next to each other like that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But in fascism, you see this rhetoric a lot. Your enemy is strong and your enemy is weak at the same time. They are individually weak, but corporately strong. In the fascist mind, the individual and the corporate are separate. So me as an individual, I may be this, this, and this. Us as a movement, we are this, this, and this. And those two things don't have to align. Which doesn't make sense, right? Because the whole is made up of individuals. But it's a way of demonizing your enemy. It's a way of othering them. You as an individual may be okay, but your movement and what you stand for is bad. And you can see, again, you as an individual are weak and cowardly. All these weak, cowardly individuals have somehow Voltroned themselves together to create a powerful, all-consuming movement. Not like our movement, where we are all physically strong. And our movement is strong, and everything about us is strong. They're just strong in the power they exert upon us. But they're weak and despicable individually. It's such an interesting concept to me because I see it all the time in political rhetoric. We'll talk about how there's this group of people controlling everything, and it's always the other political party, right? They're controlling everything, but any individual one of them is cowardly and weak. It makes you wonder how a group of all cowardly and weak people somehow managed to overpower the good and strong people. And the fascists will give you endless interpretations for why this is the case. Again, it lacks nuance. It lacks the idea that certain individuals can have certain strengths and other individuals don't. And in every group you find, there will be good people, bad people, strong people, weak people, cowardly people, brave people. Every single movement. Fascists don't like that. They like to essentialize. We are good, they are bad. Because they are bad, they are weak. And we can stop them because good always prevails. At the same time, this evil machine that they've built is so big, such a big fight, we may not be able to stop them. And the purpose of this, from the purpose of sustaining a political movement, is that you encourage your followers to go out and do violence against the enemy because they're weak and we can overpower them. And we have to go take back what's ours. But you also explain why you're not winning. You also explain why you haven't taken over yet. Every setback is, well, their structure is just too big for us to fight. It's just too much. So we have to go keep hitting the individuals. And you can see how this lends itself, like I said, to that genocidal thinking. In fascism, there is a contempt for the weak. If you are not strong, you are not with us. Remember, we have essentialized. We have said, we have self-defined. Everyone in our movement, every individual in our movement is stronger than every individual in their movement. If you were to rank us all by strength, the top would be us, the bottom would be them. None of them would be listed with us. None of us would be listed with them. So the idea then is if you show any sort of weakness, maybe you're not one of us. Well, what does weakness look like for a fascist? Well, the most obvious form of weakness in a fascist movement is pacifism. Hey, maybe we shouldn't go out and physically fight them. Maybe we should work on, making policies that are better than theirs. That's weak. That's weak. Remember, action without thought. Writing isn't action. Fighting is action. You got to take to the streets. You got to be physically engaging with people. That's action. Sitting in an office, writing, not action. Weak. And in fact, the next step is that because the weak are so contemptible, and because pacifism is for the weak, and because only our enemies are weak, pacifism becomes treason. Right? Remember, disagreement is treason. We think that we should always be fighting. So if you think that we should not be physically out there fighting with our enemy, then you are a traitor. You don't belong with us. Fascism builds this mythology around the next idea, which is that every single individual in the movement is a hero. You're a hero. You are the superhero fighting the villainous hordes. And you need to get out there and fight. You need to stand up. You need to fight for the cause because you are a hero. This leads into sort of a sub-idea here, which I don't believe has been widely mentioned as one of the subsets of this idea, but it's something that I believe. I believe that this idea that every single member is a hero also lends itself to the idea that every single person is a martyr. Maybe I die, but I've set the cause forward. How many shooters do we see, especially racially motivated shooters, who believe that their shooting is going to set off a race war? My spark will be the spark that sets everything ablaze and finally brings the world to where it needs to be, because I am a hero. Remember, fascism is recruiting from people who don't feel like heroes. They don't feel accepted, they don't feel loved, they don't feel wanted. Fascism comes along and says, hey, you're great, you're a hero, go out there and be a hero. And that person with little or nothing to lose finds themselves in a position where in order to gain the adulation of those around them, they need to go do something extreme. And so they do. Fascism is at its nature a violent ideology. You have to go find people and confront them, whether it's physically or maybe you can do it with your words. Maybe your goal is to go out and trigger as many of your political opponents as possible. Maybe that's your goal. Maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe without thinking, you just need to go make people who don't agree with you mad. These are all fascist ideas, and they all tie together. And if you showed me a political movement, it would be easy to go down this list and see how many of these things fit in and whether it's all coalescing into a consistent movement that's getting more and more of these ideas. And I think if you take the time, you can see that that's happening as well. That's why we're seeing an uptick in political violence. So building on this idea of everybody being a hero, there's also the idea of machismo and weapons. Right? Your weapons are what shows your commitment, your strength, your vitality. Yeah, weapons are a metaphor for manhood, obviously. It's been that way in almost every culture throughout history. Fascism places a very special emphasis on. In our culture, the main weapon is guns. So he who has the most guns, he who has the biggest guns, he who can use his guns most skillfully is therefore the ideal. You want to be a hero in our cause? You don't want to be weak? Get a gun so that when the time comes, you're ready. None of this pacifism. None of this, I don't want to have a weapon. You need to have a weapon. You need to be ready to use that weapon. You need to be eager to use that weapon. Because when the time comes, you've got to be that hero who saves your family, who saves your people, who saves your movement. Because you are the hero. I know, nobody cares about you, nobody likes you in society. That's because they have a plot to drag us all down. They've moved us away from our traditions. They've made us accept this new stuff that we don't like. So what we're going to do is we're going to push to go back to that, and if they stand in our way, we are going to stand up against these cowardly, weak people who have built this strong structure that we can't dismantle overnight. We're going to stand up to them, we're going to fight back, and you can be the hero. And I think it's clear how this leads to violence. I think it's clear how all of this coalesces into an angry person who will take a gun to a public place and murder someone. I'm not implying that all mass shootings are fascistic in nature. They're not. There are a multitude of reasons why people commit mass shootings. What I'm saying is that a fascist movement will lend itself to people committing that kind of violence. It's called stochastic terrorism. The language from the people at the top incites the people at the bottom to go do violence. And I think you can see how every single one of these traits of fascism leads to that inevitable violent conclusion for the individual and for the group. So as a fascistic movement grows, it begins to engage in more and more selective populism. Like I said before, there's a list of what you have to be. If you fit in that group, you're good. If you don't fit in that group, you are different, you disagree with us, you are treasonous, you do not belong. Fascism is obsessed with meeting those check marks, whatever they may be. People make lists of identities. If you check off all those identities and none of the bad ones, then you're good and you're in. And we may let someone in if they say the right things, but we all know they're not really part of the group. We're just using them to get our message to more people like us. So people will say things like, well, how can they be white supremacists? They have a black person. True. And the question is, are they using that black person to further their white supremacist goals? Because you can do that. You can use people to further your own goals. We know that. We've seen that in countless movements throughout history. You bring in some of the group that you don't like, that you don't agree with, you use them, but then when the revolution comes, they're the first ones against the wall. This is how fascism works. And the last aspect of fascism is very cult-like. A lot of these have been cult-like. Cults often go into the conspiracy theories. Several of these aspects of fascism are referred to as the cult of, right? The cult of tradition, the cult of masculinity, the cult of action for action's sake. But this one, I think, is perhaps the most cult-like, because what cults do is they isolate people from their former communities. And a fascist movement will develop its own language that nobody else understands, or that nobody else identifies with, or that nobody else agrees with. It will be a specific set of key code words that identify one member of the fascist movement to another. They will have, their secret meeting spaces with their secret ideas, and the internet has only made this worse, because on the internet, you can have your set of memes in your little message board that all of your community has seen and nobody else has. So when you go out amidst the normies, then you can make those references and you can find out who else actually agrees with you. And, if you stumble into the wrong Twitter profile, you will find somebody spouting these terms in ways that make no grammatical sense, no literal sense. You look at the sentence, you're like, I know what those words mean individually, but as a group, I have no idea what you're trying to say, but it's not for you. It's for another member of their group, another member of their movement to understand what you're saying, connect with them, and then they know that they're on the same side. These same accounts are the same ones that are popping into people's replies just to insult them, just to be rude, to bring up irrelevant topics, because each of those topics is part of this newspeak, part of this language that they have developed to say certain things. Fascist movements are complicated. I don't want anyone to walk away from this video thinking, hey, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's boom, boom, boom. It's not. All of these things given by Umberto Eco are ideas around which fascism forms. You can have these ideas without a fascism, and you can have a fascism with only a few of these ideas. But as a fascist movement develops, it will gradually gain more and more of these. So if you can think of a political movement that has a bunch of these, you know that that's a political movement that is most likely close to that end stage of fascism. The end stage of fascism is always, always political violence and genocide. Because remember, those who are different from us are treasonous. They're against us. Those who don't want to fight are against us. The goal is action, fighting. The goal is weaponry. You should use it. And the goal is that we remove those people who are part of that plot to bring us down from our society. I think the word fascist gets thrown around a lot nowadays without people understanding it. And even if I agree with you that a political movement is fascist, we need to understand what we're saying when we say that. Because when we say fascist too much, just like any word, it begins to lose its meaning. Fascism is a dangerous ideology. Fascist ideologies are becoming more common, especially as the internet facilitates certain groups, right? People who are disaffected socially can now find groups. They can develop their own languages. That's two of the methods of fascism. They start blaming a specific group for their problems. Now we're at 3. They decide this group has a plan to bring them down. That's 4, right? It's very easy now with the spread of the internet for the internet to coalesce these fascist movements. My purpose today in this video is not to convince you of anything. It is to give you information about what fascism can be, so that in the future, when you hear or see the word fascist, you can think to yourself, is it? Is it fascist? How many of those elements does it have in it? Is it developing any more? Is it moving towards any of the others? Oh, maybe it is. Okay, I can kind of see that. But if the only thought you've had so far is that fascist equals bad, that's not going to help you, because anything you see as bad then is fascist. That's not a useful definition of the word. What I've given you today, I hope, is a functioning definition of the word fascist, so that when you go out and you see or hear the word, you can give it the over-analysis that it deserves, because that's what we all need to do. We need to spend more time analyzing our thoughts, our words, and our actions, because too little thought makes us fascists.